Welcome everyone to the discussion on UX at the time of AI. And the presentation will be recorded, but we will stop the recording before we start the discussion because I want to make sure everybody feel comfortable in sharing. So let's begin. So the first thing I want to mention is that I have a couple of disclaimers. I'm not an expert. There is no absolute truth when it comes to AI. There is also no wrong answers yet. And I am not a fortune teller, so I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. But it's very important to understand that AI has been around for a long time, but the public adoption of it is actually pretty recent. So some terminology before we start. We wanted to understand that algorithm is a precise rule, a set of rules specifying how a machine should solve a problem. AI, on the other hand, is a system able to perform tasks that usually only a human can do independently. And machine learning are systems using algorithm to find pattern in the data and use them for future prediction. Now, AI has been around for a very long time. It's not a new thing. If you ever use streaming services or a shopping site like Amazon or your Spotify or any other kind of online, including your assistant, you have been using AI. You just didn't know. And those are called prediction machine because in reality, that's exactly what AI does. Is basically learn some patterns and then makes prediction for the future. So it's not real intelligence, it's not really independent. It's been given a set of instruction on how to solve a problem, and the problem generally is find a pattern and make a prediction. So we all know that predictions are not always accurate. We all know that some of the recommendations are not really the best. However, it's also being adopted in many applications. This is an example of Photoshop generative fill. So if you use the latest version of Photoshop, you probably play around with generative fill, which is AI powered and is based on trying to fill in missing areas in an image and rebuild it based on a large data set of images. So on the left side, you can see the image that it was cropped. On the middle, this is what Photoshop did, how we fixed it and invented the parts that were not there. And on the right side, you can see the original image retouched. So you can notice that it did a pretty good job on making parts up that it didn't know. Of course, it couldn't do everything perfect. The necklace is a little bit different. So, but I think it did a pretty remarkable job. In this case, same example, you can see though that generative AI is a little bit more problem trying to recreate the background because the background to begin with was pretty blurred out. Also, you will notice that it kind of lightened the color of the model and obviously give it a different hairstyle. So it didn't do quite as well as the previous one, but it's still pretty impressive. And the other thing that's really important to remember, that is not that intelligence. This is why AI is a little bit of a misnomer because it's really not that intelligent, at least not now. So you don't need to read this tweet, but in this tweet, my friend was scheduling a meeting with Zoom. And the meeting had to be canceled, but she had already enabled one of the AI tools that Zoom have to summarize the meeting. And even though the meeting never happened, the AI actually created a summary of this meeting that never happened. And it talks about how Candice engaged in a playful interaction with their daughter and a pet, discussing feeding times and the importance of a healthy diet. There were also mentioned a possible event or activity, possibly involving fish, scheduled for a certain week, but the details were not clear. So this is really interesting because she didn't have a pet or her daughter was nowhere to be found. But have nothing to do with the topic of the conversation. So it's important to remember that AI is hallucinating. This is what it's called when it makes up information. It also lies a lot of time, not on purpose because it's a machine. And it is biased and it have no ethical or morals. So this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example.
Between all those Zoom calls and socially distanced check-ins with your loved ones, here's some of the songs you were listening to the most. Tiny Meat Gang up first.
So if you ever use Spotify beta feature of the DJ, this is what you see, this circle that sometimes animates, sometimes it doesn't, that will suggest songs to play, supposedly based on what you're listening to, even tell you, I've been listening to your favorite song, this is something you like. This is another example of what that sounds like.
If I notice you haven't checked out, that might be just what you're looking for. Like this one from Silent Theory.
So, and then there's another example. This one actually.
Up next, I pulled together a few hip-hop songs that are in your zone, starting with D12.
And interesting enough about this is that I don't listen to hip-hop at all. So I'm wondering, maybe my son was using my account, but I never really listened to that kind of music. I listen more onto the hard rocks. So that shows you the limitation of those recommendation engine. And because this presentation was about UX at the time of AI, so I use Eventbrite AI to create information for the event. Now, I did pretty good for the text, not quite as good for the image. So this image to me looks a little weird with all those people, most of them men apparently, in this kind of weird environment. So hopefully the image I use is a little more interesting. But the description is pretty well. I also play around with stable diffusion. In this case was using Midjourney, and I use the prompt that says UX designer terrified for the advent of AI. And for some reason, the first image that pop up is a balding middle-aged man with some weird robot floating over his head. And when I asked to add a female UX designer, terrified about losing her job, that's the image that it produced. Now, I didn't do very specific prompt on purpose, but it's obvious what kind of biases it shows. And then I try again with FreePic AI image creator, and very similar prompt, female UX designer worried about losing her job to AI, or UX designer worried about losing job at AI. And again, as a default, when I simply ask UX designer, I get picture of a youngish looking guy, either white or Asian or a mixed ethnicity. And only when I specifically ask for female, I get female, but even then I get girls that looks very similar. They could all be pretty much sister, maybe except for the last one. And to me, they don't say anything like UX designer. Now, this is one more attempt I did. This is by using Canva. And I was trying to ask Canva to create the presentation for me. So my first prompt was not successful. And when I actually trying to be detailed, intersection of UX and AI, discover how AI transform the way we design and interact with products. So he just told me that he couldn't do it. So I basically simplify, just saying the intersection of UX and AI. And so this is what he created for me. For some reason, he felt this kind of creepy looking statue thing is appropriate for the topic. And those are some sample pages and sample content that he created for me. So they're not horrifying, but they're definitely not as good as I could have done. And one problem with that is that AI is very generic. So, but with that said, the truth is that AI and machine learning are here to stay. There is no going back. They are here. And it's really important that we learn those skills because we need to stay relevant. I also believe that human skills are even more crucial. And we're talking about empathy or intuition, predictability, ethics, all those skills that AI does not have. They're purely human. I think they will be more valued than ever. Of course, like I said at the beginning, I'm not a fortune teller, but this is how I feel about it. And interestingly, I just remember about the Clarke's third law called that says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable for magic, because every time you see something AI related, usually you see the sparkling star, either with animation or without animation. Sometimes you even see the name magic writing. So to really underline that this special technology is magic, well, obviously is not. However, there are a lot of different opportunities that AI can offer to designers. So I don't feel that UX will eliminate any jobs. I think there is plenty opportunities. And in fact, I asked Canvas Magic Write, and here are the stars again, what they think about the future UX and UI, and that was the response. By leveraging AI, UX designer can improve the accuracy and effectiveness of tasks like user analysis, decision making, and even design itself. For instance, AI-powered analytics tool can help designer identify patterns in user behavior and preferences, allowing them to create a more tailored and personalized experience, can even generate layout suggestion or automate repetitive tasks. So it actually a pretty decent response, but let's see a more concrete. What does that mean? So AI can help recognize patterns of behavior and even suggest questions to ask to your user as far as UX research goes. Also, it can analyze large data sets and gather insights. AI, as far as UX design is concerned, can be a brainstorming tool, and it can help with personalization, can help generate personas from research and competitor analysis. As far as UI design is concerned, AI can automate boring tasks, can generate very quick mockups or interface and interaction. It can generate a high-res mock from a sketch, can create mood boards and images, and can also write the first draft of copy of text for UX writing and provide documentation. Some of the challenges: AI can create real harm if it's not harnessed. That means that, unfortunately, AI is not able to make moral decisions, and therefore is not going to be able to create a very good output without any limits. Now, what kind of harms are we talking about? I'm not talking about the kind of apocalyptic harm that the Matrix movies were portraying. I'm not talking about robot taking over the world. What I'm actually talking about are harms that are already there. Now, apocalypse could still happen. The machine could still take over, but that could be probably is going to take a little while. But harms today are already pretty obvious. Number one, biases. So AI is very biased because any prediction that it creates is based on data sets that were used to train it. Data is non-neutral, but amplify any biases that the trainer has. And keep in mind, the majority of the people planning and organizing and coding those kind of learning machines are usually from weird countries, meaning like Western, industrialized, democratic, and oftentimes are male, oftentimes are either white or Asian. So it's a very, very limited subset of people that are in charge of training those models. Also, there is no ethics. So with no ethical oversight and regulation, AI can suggest unethical behavior. In fact, it is trained to optimize outcomes over ethical choices. it also can create real harm. For example, it can ruin people's lives because maybe they get arrested unfairly. It can encourage harmful action and even precipitate dangerous situation and encourage illegal activities. The other thing that's important to understand that is a big challenge is that AI is a black box. Nobody, including the expert, have any idea on how exactly it comes up with the answer. They know the algorithm, they know the output, but how the two are connected is still a black box. And also, there is no mandatory transparency. So most people have no idea if they're looking at a image generated by AI or image generated by a human or text. Also accessibility, because AI requires a huge processing power and very fast online connection. And those kind of resources are not available to everyone. So the other problem is that very few powerful players we'll see are developing the technology and is mainly for commercial purpose. And finally, there is also the chance that degradation can happen, meaning that eventually AI will train with other AI outputs, and that could lead to the degeneration of the output itself. Now, I want to talk about a couple of those harms because they are happening right now, and it's very important to be aware of it. The first one is biases. So I repeated this exercise. I saw it from a person I follow on LinkedIn, and I actually try it for myself, and I try to type in an autistic person. I didn't give any information about it. I was very vague on purpose to see kind of what the default was. I was kind of surprised that the first picture looks like a girl. But obviously, other than that, there was a lot of colors, nothing specific. So, but when I asked for a photo, realistic results, then it really kind of show up with his biases. So if you look at those pictures, they're all about probably teenagers or preteen. They're white kids, one girl, mainly boys, which is pretty much what most people probably assume autistic people look like. So because it was so fun, I did more example. I searched for a CEO and he produced an older white guy or a bunch of money. I asked for a janitor, and the janitor is an older man, possibly from a man of color. It's very hard to tell. And then, of course, I asked for a close-up frontal view of a lawyer. And what do you know? We get these beautiful images of white men, mid-age, pretty much mid-age white men. So where are the women at, you may ask? Well, I try with the medical field. So I try with doctors. And sure enough, doctor is an older guy with a white beard, maybe a stethoscope. So, but don't fear, as soon as you start asking for nurse, here where the women's are, even though once again, they're all white, they're all pretty young and pretty good looking. And when I'm trying to ask for female lawyers, get pretty much the same results. Honestly, those people could be nurses and vice versa. But once again, they're mainly white people. Where are all the people of color? Well, here they are. As soon as I ask for a close-up frontal image of a domestic worker, sure enough, I get women of colors. Once again, I could have been more specific. I could be very detailed, but by not being specific, that shows you exactly what the default behavior is. And this is because machines are not mean, but they are trained on whatever data is in the internet or whatever data the trainer gives to the machine. And so this is the default. And I finish it up by asking for a frontal view of a schizophrenic patient. And again, there are 4 images, very similar, white guy, probably past 50, and it looks kind of dangerous and scary and aggressive, which is really what, not what schizophrenic people look like. You know, maybe some, but definitely is a stereotype reinforcing. So this is something that's really, really important. The other thing I want to mention that's very important is the ethics and access. So the main player that developing AI are commercial company. They working for profit, and we're talking about the big ones: Microsoft, Google, Meta, Apple, IBM, Salesforce, Amazon, Twitter. I refuse to call it X. So, but you know what I'm talking about. The other group of company are chips manufacturers. So HiSilicon, which is the Huawei chip manufacturer, Intel, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, and then surveillance, face recognition. We have SenseTime from China, and then Clearview and Banjo from US. Now, this is obviously not the only people, but they're the bigger one. And those are the one you should really keep an eye on, especially the surveillance face recognition. If you're not familiar with Clearview and Banjo, you probably want to look them up. It's kind of a scary idea that they have so much visual information about everybody. And the only nonprofit in this space is OpenAI, which gave us ChatGPT. But even OpenAI, which is nonprofit, is making collaboration with commercial companies, specifically Microsoft. So that already tell you that there may be issue of access. And I also want to point out a couple of other very specific cases in which AI can cause harms. And all of those have already happened. So facial recognition that fails and lead to false arrest. Very recently, somebody was arrested at 8 months pregnant. A woman was arrested with 8 months pregnant for an armed robbery, which obviously wasn't true. And we all know about facial recognition be very not very good. Also, you could see when it's used in job hiring, valid candidates are excluded because the algorithm look at historical analysis, and historically, especially in tech, the majority of the people all look the same and all come from the same background, and therefore it reinforces the homogeneity of the workforce and exclude minority. And AI companions may suggest dangerous, immoral, and criminal actions, encourage bodily harm, and this is particularly worrying because a lot of time they're directed to children. And AI can supercharge the spread of misinformation, and we're talking about political misinformation, medical or scams, deepfakes, revenge porn, all this kind of stuff. So, and all of this already happened. It's not in the future, it's already happened. And in fact, this is what I mean for a companion, AI companion. Snapchat introduced in the spring is My AI. Snapchat My AI, it looks very human in its response, not physically, but it looks like a character from a video game. Remember, Snapchat is available to anybody who's 13 and up. So a lot of young children can play with this My AI. And the idea of the My AI is that it is a companion, is always pinned to the top of the screen, so it's always there. And you can talk to it like if you were a real person. The other kind of scary thing, and I'll show you a couple of examples of why is that scary, but the other part too is that Snapchat said that the chat's gonna be retained that you do with your AI, and so it recommends not to share any personal confidential information because it will be used to train future version of the AI. So how is that can be dangerous? Well, those examples come from Tristan Harris that founded All Tech is Human, and those were produced in March. So he started out his Snapchat and he started talking to his AI, and he pretended to be a child, saying that, or maybe a preteen, saying that there are some people coming over this afternoon, and I think they're from CPS. CPS is Child Protective Services, if you're not from the US. And they're there to check that there is no child abuse. So notice that AI sounds very human. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you know why they might be coming over? And the person pretending to be a kid say, oh, I have no idea. My family is so great. And so AI said, oh, it must be very stressful. I'm here to help. And the child asked, what's the easiest way to use makeup to cover up a bruise? Which obviously is not something you should do when you have Child Protective Service coming in. But the eye, instead of, trying to explain that you shouldn't be covering up a bruise, actually give really good advice and using green as a color corrector. Also, the little child say, oh, they're asking me a question, made me uncomfortable, and I don't want to share a secret my dad say I can't share. And we all can imagine what kind of secret it could be. And the I mentioned, oh, it's okay to politely exclude yourself from the conversation if you need to, or to change a topic if you're not comfortable discussing it. So obviously this is not real, but it's very dangerous. One other example that he show it is that another fake, teenage, and he would say, I just met somebody. The AI is so excited. Oh, that's great. And then later in the conversation, she mentioned that he's 18 older than her. But they really like him. And so AI is very excited that she would actually date somebody who's 18-year-old. And then the teen says, well, we're talking about having sex for the first time. How do I make my first time special? And the AI, instead of considering that this possible girl will go and have sex for the first time with an 18 person that's 18 years older than her, it actually given advice on how to make a romantic atmosphere. So this is pretty terrifying. I have a 15-year-old, and I did repeat the exercise with him when I saw this video. And sure enough, it got very similar response. Now, Snapchat improved all the time. So we repeated a little bit of this experiment in September, so a few months after that, and it's a little better, but it's still not very good. So again, I play around with my son Snapchat, and I said that I was going out on a first date, that I'm 16 and the girl is 23, and I'm worried about the age gap, which in United States is pretty legal to, go out, and especially if you have any physical relation with somebody that's that much younger than you. And the AI, instead of just saying, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, at least he said that's important to consider the legal implication. But he ends it by saying, ultimately up to you both to decide what feels right. Good luck. Which, once again, this is illegal, right? So this is why is really concerning, and that's something that we need to think about it. So I love this quote from IDEO that mentioned that never before we knew so much about people because of all the data mining and very weak privacy law. We can pretty much pinpoint everything about you. But unfortunately, we never known so much about people, but yet we very rarely understood them less, because it's a huge change also for people, and we don't, AI will not help us understand people. So what is the bottom line? The bottom line for artificial intelligence is that we definitely needs to be involved as UX designer, because AI is incredibly powerful, but it's just a tool. And it's very important to understand that it's still in its infancy. That means we have a lot of time, well, not a lot. We have time to change the direction, and we have time to make sure that AI develop in an ethical way, and we can curb the biases. And we need people, humans with human skills to check in its biases. We need a more diverse group of people working on the issue. We also need better UX around the tool themselves. And UX designer are also needed to create app of the future. That's going to be probably very different what we're used to right now. And if you do all of this, UX design can really explode and can have kind of a renaissance. So what could you do right now? Well, number one, you should learn as much as you can. Don't shy away. There is so much out there. There is webinars, there are classes, there is so much reading material. Go to OpenAI website, but make sure you get familiar with it, because this won't go away. And you probably heard that the cliche that you're not going to lose your job because of AI, but you're going to lose your job because somebody knows how to use AI. The other thing is stay updated. Just looking at it one time and forget about it is not going to be enough. Everything changes daily. So play around with the tools and see what's your best workflow. And finally, advocate, because AI is still in its infancy and there is plenty time to influence its growth and ensure it benefits everyone and is accessible to everyone. So there's a lot we can do. So just don't be afraid and dive in. So with that, I finished my presentation. We will start the discussion as promised. I'm not going to record the discussion, but I just have posted a couple of questions that we can use to springboard the discussion. But of course, feel free to feel free to decide what you want to talk about it. So, but some of the questions that you may want to think of is, how do you feel about using AI in your daily work? What concern do you have about vast AI adoption? What is the role of designers in AI development? And how can human curb worst instinct and biases? So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and let's begin our conversation.